As Danny pulled away from the grave, his mind swirled with a tumult of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. The car's headlights cut through the darkness, but the shadows of his grief lingered, heavy and suffocating. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, feeling the tension knot in his stomach as he fought back the tears that threatened to spill over. Suddenly, an uncontrollable wave of rage surged through him. He swung the car to a stop, tires skidding on the gravel, and slammed the gear into park. Without thinking, he flung open the door and stormed back toward the grave, the weight of his sorrow and frustration clawing at him like a wild animal desperate to escape. "Why?" he shouted, his voice cracking under the strain. "Why did it have to end like this?" The question hung in the air, unanswered and echoing in the quiet of the night. Before he knew it, he was standing before the freshly covered mound, the earth piled high in a crude mockery of comfort. The sight of it ignited a firestorm of emotion within him, and he felt the tears finally break free, streaming down his face as anger and grief collided in a painful symphony. In a sudden burst of frustration, he kicked at the dirt, sending a small spray of earth flying into the air. "Damn it," he yelled, his voice raw and filled with pain. He felt like a child throwing a tantrum, but he didn't care. The absurdity of the day, the laughter, the love, and now this was just too much to bear. The world felt cruel, and he wanted to lash out to make it feel his hurt. Danny dropped to his knees, the coolness of the ground grounding him as he buried his face in his hands. The tears came in heaving sobs, each one a release of the pent-up grief that had been suffocating him. "I don't understand. I don't understand," he cried, the words pouring out of him like a dam breaking. The bitterness of loss gnawed at him, and he felt utterly alone in a world that suddenly felt so unforgiving. He looked up at the grave, the dirt now settled, and a wave of despair washed over him. "You were supposed to be here," he shouted, the anguish in his voice echoing through the night. He kicked the tombstone as if it were somehow responsible for the pain he felt, the hard surface solid and unyielding beneath his foot. "Why couldn't you just stay? Why couldn't I protect you?" The night air felt heavy with his anguish, and in that moment Danny felt utterly lost. He was filled with a desperate yearning for the past, for the moments he could never reclaim. The laughter, the companionship, the warmth, they were gone, swept away by the cruel hand of fate, and he was left with nothing but this unbearable void. As he sat there, the dirt beneath him cool and unyielding, he realized the futility of his anger. Kicking at the grave wouldn't bring back what he had lost. It wouldn't change the reality of his situation. With a deep shuddering breath, he let the tears flow freely, allowing himself to grieve openly. "I miss you," he whispered into the night, the admission raw and vulnerable. "I wish I could have done more." The sorrow felt like a heavy blanket draped over him, but in that moment of vulnerability, he also felt a flicker of something else, a deep, abiding love that would never truly fade. Slowly he stood, wiping his eyes and taking a deep breath. He knew he had to move forward to find a way to honor the love he had lost. As he looked down at the grave one last time, he whispered a promise to remember to cherish and to carry that love with him always. With a heavy heart, Danny turned away from the grave, the night still surrounding him, and walked back to his car, determined to face the unpredictable journey ahead. The road stretched out before him once more, and as he climbed into the driver's seat, he felt the first stirrings of hope blossom amidst the sadness. He would carry the memories with him, learning to navigate the complexities of grief and love, 1 mile at a time. Mickey sat at the bar, nursing a drink that had long since lost its appeal. The dim light cast shadows across his face, reflecting the weight of the conversation swirling around him. He could hear snippets of chatter from a couple of patrons nearby, their voices rising above the soft hum of the music playing in the background. "Have you seen Danny lately?" one of them asked, a hint of concern lacing their tone. Mickey's ears perked up, and he instinctively leaned in, curious despite himself. He had watched Danny transform over the past few months, and what he heard next only deepened his worry. "Yeah, it's like he's a completely different person," the other replied. "The guy who used to light up a room, gone. Now he's just this shell of himself, lost in sadness and despair." Mickey felt a pang in his chest. He had known Danny for years, shared countless laughs and good times, but lately it was as if all the joy had been stripped away, leaving behind a haunting emptiness. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing his friend to the shadows, the vibrant spirit he once knew now replaced by a man who seemed to drown in sorrow with every drink he took. Poor guy just sits there at the bar day after day, the first patron continued. I don't even recognize him anymore. Mickey's heart ached with the realization that they were right. He had seen the change in Danny, how happiness had been replaced with a heavy sadness that hung around him like a shroud. It was as if the light had gone out, and all that remained was a shadow of the man he used to be. Wish he'd just talk to someone, you know, the second person added. But I guess everyone handles grief differently. Mickey nodded to himself, pondering the weight of their words. He missed the Danny who would burst into a room with infectious laughter, the one who could light up even the darkest days. Now all he saw was a man trapped in his own despair, drowning in bottles and memories he couldn't escape. Just as he was lost in thought, the front door swung open with a creak, and in walked Danny. He looked a little disheveled, his eyes heavy with the weight of the world. There was a familiar sadness etched into his features, and Mickey's heart sank at the sight. "Hey Mickey," Danny said, his voice hoarse and worn. He approached the bar like a man on a mission, desperation flickering in his gaze. "I need a shot, hell maybe I need many." Mickey's chest tightened at the words, a mix of concern and helplessness washing over him. He could see the anguish lurking in Danny's eyes, the pain masked by a thin veneer of bravado. "You sure that's what you need, Danny?" he asked gently, trying to gauge his friend's state of mind. Danny let out a hollow laugh, a sound devoid of joy. "What else is there?" he replied, his expression a mix of defiance and vulnerability. "It's all I've got left." Mickey felt a surge of sorrow for his friend. He wanted to reach out to pull him back from the edge, but he knew that Danny had to want that for himself. "You know, we could talk instead. It might help," he suggested, hoping to offer an alternative to the bottle. Danny shook his head, the weight of grief pulling him down. "Talking won't change anything," he said, a bitterness creeping into his voice. "I'm just tired of feeling this." With a heavy heart, Mickey poured a shot of whiskey and slid it across the bar. "Just remember I'm here for you," he said softly, watching as Danny took the glass and downed it in one swift motion. For a fleeting moment, Mickey caught a glimpse of the old Danny, the one who enjoyed life and relished in the laughter. But it was gone just as quickly as it appeared, swallowed up by the shadows once again. As Danny signaled for another drink, Mickey felt the weight of memories flood his mind. The good times, the laughter, the brotherhood they had shared. But now all he could do was sit there watching as his friend spiraled deeper into despair, hoping that one day Danny would find the strength to rise from the depths and reclaim the joy that had once defined him. 7 shots deep, Danny leaned heavily against the bar, the world around him swirling in a haze of alcohol and despair. Sweat dripped from his brow, mixing with the tears he refused to shed. He turned to Mickey, desperation etched across his face. "Hey Mickey, can I get some more?" he called out, his voice tinged with urgency, but also laced with an unmistakable plea for escape. Mickey's heart sank at the sight of his friend, the man he once knew now a mere shadow of himself. "Danny, you sure you want more?" he asked, concern tightening around his chest. Every shot Danny took felt like another nail in the coffin of the vibrant spirit he had once known, the laughter, the joy, the light that had radiated from him now replaced by a darkness that threatened to swallow him whole. Danny shrugged it off, a hollow laugh escaping his lips, but it sounded more like a cry echoing through a cavernous void. "You're right, just give me 3 bottles instead," he replied, his voice tinged with reckless determination as if he were daring the world to stop him. Mickey felt a deep pang of sadness wash over him, cutting through his heart like a knife. This wasn't the Danny who would have laughed at such a suggestion. This was a man drowning, grasping at anything that could numb the pain. With a heavy heart, he turned to the shelves and grabbed 3 bottles. Sliding them over to Danny felt like handing him a lifeline that he was too far gone to grasp. "Here you go," Mickey said softly, his voice barely above a whisper, filled with a blend of resignation and sorrow. He watched, helpless, as Danny snatched the bottles with trembling hands, the weight of his decision heavy in the air. Each bottle felt like a step further away from the man he once adored, a beloved friend now lost to the depths of despair. Danny didn't hesitate, cracking open the first bottle with a practiced ease that sent shivers down Mickey's spine. He took a long swig, the liquid disappearing down his throat as if it were the only thing anchoring him in this turbulent sea of sorrow. Mickey felt a knot form in his stomach, each gulp a heartbreaking reminder of how far Danny had fallen, how much he was losing himself in the process. Unable to just sit and watch the train wreck unfold, Mickey pulled out his phone, a surge of urgency driving him to reach out to his wife. He knew she had been worried about Danny for weeks now, and he wanted her to know that her fears were justified. With each bottle Danny downed, the pit in Mickey's stomach deepened. He dialed her number, the ringing echoing like a countdown to something he desperately hoped wouldn't happen. "Hey, it's me," Mickey said when she answered, his voice heavy with emotion. "I just wanted to let you know Danny's not trying to hear me. He's drinking again. I don't know how to reach him and it's tearing me apart." He listened as she responded, her voice filled with concern. "Is he okay? What's going on?" Mickey glanced at Danny, who had now moved on to the third bottle, his face a mask of determination mixed with a profound sadness that pierced Mickey's heart. "I don't know, honestly. He looks like he's trying to drown something, and I'm scared he's going to go too far this time. I don't know how to help him," he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "Can you get him to talk? Just remind him that there are people who care," she urged, her voice a lifeline in the storm. "He needs to know he's not alone." Mickey nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I'll try, but he's not in a place to listen right now. I just hope he doesn't hurt himself. I don't know how much longer I can watch him do this." As he ended the call, a wave of helplessness washed over him. The weight of the world felt crushing, and the futility of his attempts to save Danny felt like a boulder pressing down on his chest. With a deep breath, Mickey steeled himself, determined to at least try. "Danny," he called out, his voice steady but filled with urgency, desperation seeping through. "Let's talk, man. You don't have to do this alone." Danny looked up, his expression a blend of defiance and weariness that spoke volumes. "What's there to talk about?" he replied, the bitterness in his voice cutting deep. "I'm fine." But Mickey could see the cracks in that facade, the flicker of vulnerability hidden beneath the bravado. "Just sit with me for a minute, okay? We can figure this out together," Mickey pleaded, his heart aching at the sight of his friend spiraling further into the abyss. "Please, Danny, I can't just watch you drown." Danny hesitated, the weight of his choices hanging heavily in the air, a storm brewing behind his eyes. Mickey could only wait, hope mingling with fear, praying that somewhere deep inside, the man he once knew would find the strength to emerge from the darkness. As Danny's resolve wavered, Mickey felt a glimmer of hope ignite within him, the flicker of a possibility that maybe, just maybe, he could reach his friend before it was too late. As Mickey tried to reach Danny, pouring his heart out, the atmosphere in the bar shifted abruptly. The door swung open with a creak, and in walked two imposing figures, their presence immediately commanding attention. Mickey's eyes narrowed as he watched them approach Danny, a mix of apprehension and curiosity swirling within him. "Hey, damn, there you are," one of the men boomed, clapping a hand on Danny's shoulder with a casual familiarity that sent a shiver down Mickey's spine. "You did good. You did good." With that, he pulled out a thick stack of cash, the bundles crisp and stacked neatly, glinting under the dim lights of the bar. 15 grand, just like I promised. Mickey's heart raced, confusion washing over him. What kind of deal had Danny gotten himself into? He struggled to comprehend the implications of the money being handed over. The man leaned closer, his voice low but firm. "I said good job," he reiterated before turning to walk away, his companion following closely behind. Mickey's instincts kicked in, and he turned to Danny, a mix of concern and confusion etched on his face. "Who were those guys?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, trying to gauge Danny's state of mind. Danny shrugged, the nonchalance in his demeanor only deepening Mickey's unease. "You don't want to know," he replied, his tone dismissive but laced with an underlying tension that sent alarm bells ringing in Mickey's head. It was as if Danny was attempting to shield him from something dark, something that lurked just beneath the surface. Mickey felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He wanted to press further to dig deeper into the situation, but he could see the walls Danny had built around himself were fortified with pain and denial. Instead of fighting it, he watched as Danny returned to his drinking, cracking open another bottle with a determination that was both heartbreaking and alarming. Time passed slowly as Mickey sat there, the weight of the moment heavy in the air. Danny continued to drink, each swig drawing him deeper into a haze, the world around him fading into the background. Mickey couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness as he watched his friend slide further away, the flicker of hope he had felt moments earlier dimming with each bottle that disappeared. Eventually, the inevitable happened. Danny's eyelids grew heavy, the fight within him dwindling as his body succumbed to the alcohol. He slumped forward, the empty bottles scattered around him like fallen soldiers in a battle he had long since lost. Mickey felt a mix of sadness and resignation settle over him as he watched Danny succumb to sleep. The man who had once been full of life, now reduced to a mere shadow lost in a sea of intoxication. Mickey sighed deeply, feeling the weight of the situation crash down on him like a tidal wave. He wanted to reach out to shake Danny awake, to pull him back from the brink, but he knew that the fight had to come from Danny himself. All he could do was sit there, the bar's dim lights flickering like the hope he held for his friend, praying that one day Danny would find his way back to the surface. As the night dragged on, Mickey remained vigilant, determined to be there for Danny in whatever way he could. The road ahead was uncertain, but he vowed to stand by his friend, hoping against hope that Danny would realize he didn't have to face the darkness alone. The morning light seeped through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room as Danny slowly regained consciousness. He stirred, his head pounding like a drum, each throb echoing the memories of the night before. Blinking against the brightness, he found himself in an unfamiliar setting. His own bedroom, yet it felt foreign, marred by the remnants of confusion and regret. As he lay there, the disheveled sheets tangled around him, Danny glanced around the room, trying to piece together the fragments of his memory. The walls, adorned with photographs and memories of brighter days, seemed to mock him now. Each image held a story, a laughter that felt distant, a happiness that had slipped through his fingers. He furrowed his brow, wondering how he had ended up back here, the events of the previous night clouded by the haze of alcohol. With a heavy sigh, Danny pushed himself up, the movement sending sharp pangs of discomfort through his skull. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, his bare feet touching the cool floor, grounding him momentarily. Determined to shake off the fog, he made his way to the bathroom, each step a reminder of the choices he had made. Once inside, he turned on the faucet, the sound of water filling the silence around him. Leaning over the sink, he splashed cold water on his face, the shock of it jolting him into a semblance of clarity. As he looked up into the mirror, the reflection staring back was a haunting reminder of the man he had become. Haggard, weary, eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and despair. It was then that his gaze fell on the tattoo inked on his right hand, a simple yet profound design that had once held so much meaning. The sight of it triggered a flood of memories, pulling him back to a time when life felt lighter, when laughter came easily, and burdens were shared rather than shouldered alone. "Oh right," he murmured to himself, the realization washing over him like a wave. "I'm Danny Morgan," he whispered, the name feeling both familiar and foreign on his lips. "I can never forget, no matter how much I drink." The words hung in the air, a painful truth that resonated deep within him. As he stared into his own eyes in the mirror, a wave of emotion swept over him, and he felt the tears begin to fall. The hot droplets streamed down his cheeks, mingling with the water from the faucet, a physical manifestation of the turmoil inside him. It was a cathartic release, a moment when he allowed himself to feel the weight of his struggles, the pain of his choices. Each tear carried with it the memories of laughter that had turned into sorrow, a friendship strained by the weight of unspoken words, and the haunting realization that he was battling demons that had become all too familiar. Danny leaned against the sink, his heart aching as he confronted the reality of his situation. He knew he had to face the consequences of his actions, to reach out for help, and to mend the relationships that had frayed in the wake of his drinking. But for now, in this moment of vulnerability, he allowed himself to feel the pain, to acknowledge the truth that had been buried beneath the surface for far too long. With a deep breath, he wiped the tears from his face, determination slowly replacing despair. Today would be different. He would take the first steps toward healing, toward reclaiming the parts of himself that had been lost. It was a long road ahead, but as he looked at his reflection once more, he saw not just a man weighed down by his choices, but a man ready to fight for his life, for his friendships, and for the person he once was. After brushing his teeth and taking a refreshing shower, Danny felt a little more human. The steam from the hot water had cleared some of the fog from his mind, and as he dressed in comfortable clothes, he took a moment to breathe in the familiar scent of his own space. He wandered back to the bedroom, where he settled down on the windowsill, the morning sun warming his face. Outside, the world seemed vibrant and alive, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had brewed within him just hours before. He watched as birds flitted from branch to branch, their carefree movements a reminder of the simplicity of life that he longed to reclaim. As he sat there lost in thought, he heard a soft knock on his door, followed by a gentle voice. "Can I come in?" the voice asked, and Danny recognized it instantly. "Yeah, come in," he replied, a hint of relief washing over him. The door creaked open, and in walked Maggie, his cousin, with her usual bright smile and a warmth that instantly made the room feel lighter. "Good morning, Danny. How are you feeling today?" she asked, her eyes scanning his face for any signs of distress. Danny offered a small smile in return, grateful for her presence. "I'm good," he said, though he knew the truth was more complicated. He appreciated her concern, even if he wasn't quite ready to unpack everything just yet. Maggie settled on the edge of the bed, her demeanor shifting slightly as she leaned in, her voice softening. "So, Danny, are you coming with us to church today?" Danny thought for a moment, the idea of gathering with family and community feeling both daunting and comforting. "Yeah, why not?" he said, a sense of determination creeping into his voice. "I have to talk to someone there anyway." Maggie's expression brightened at his response. "That's great to hear. I know it'll help you feel better. Plus, the congregation is always so welcoming." She paused, her eyes reflecting genuine care. "You're not alone in this, you know. We all want to support you." Danny nodded, appreciating her words. He understood that church wasn't just about faith. It was about community and finding strength in connection. "Thanks, Maggie. I really need that right now," he admitted, a hint of vulnerability slipping through. "Okay, I made some food. Let's go eat," she said, standing up and offering her hand to him. As he rose to join her, he felt invigorated by the prospect of a new day and the support of family. The weight of the past night still lingered, but with each step he took toward the kitchen, he felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. Maybe today would be the day he began to reclaim his path, surrounded by those who cared for him, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they made their way downstairs, Danny felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was determined to confront his struggles head-on, to seek the help he needed, and to reconnect with the life he had almost lost. With Maggie by his side, he felt a little less alone, ready to embrace the day and whatever it might bring. As Danny pulled into the church parking lot, he felt a mix of excitement and trepidation swirling in his stomach. The familiar building loomed in front of him, a place that had once been a sanctuary for him, filled with memories of laughter, community, and the warmth of faith. Now, however, it felt like a dawning threshold, a step into the unknown after a long absence. He parked the car, took a deep breath, and glanced at Maggie, who smiled encouragingly at him. "You've got this, Danny," she said, her voice steady and reassuring. With a nod, he opened the door and stepped out, the crisp air hitting his face as he tried to steady his nerves. Together they walked toward the entrance, the sound of laughter and soft music drifting through the open doors, creating an inviting atmosphere. As they stepped inside, the familiar scent of polished wood and floral arrangements enveloped him. People were chatting amiably, their voices mingling with the gentle strumming of a guitar. But as soon as Danny crossed the threshold, a hush fell over the room. Heads turned, eyes widened, and the chatter faded into whispers of surprise and disbelief. Danny could feel the weight of their gazes upon him. Some were filled with surprise, others with curiosity, and a few with genuine concern. The pastor, a kind-hearted man who had watched Danny grow up, stood at the front of the sanctuary, his mouth slightly agape as he registered the sight of Danny walking through the front door. It was as if time had paused for a moment, and Danny felt the gravity of the moment settle heavily on his shoulders. "Danny," the pastor exclaimed, his voice booming with a mix of joy and disbelief. "It's so good to see you." Danny managed a small smile, feeling a rush of warmth at his pastor's welcoming demeanor. "Good to see you too, Pastor," he replied, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. The murmurs began to rise again. Whispers of astonishment rippled through the congregation. For many, Danny had been known as the badass of the neighborhood, a wild spirit who had lived life on the edge, often pushing boundaries and testing limits. Seeing him here in church sparked something profound in those who knew him, igniting a flicker of hope. It was a reminder that transformation was possible, that change could happen, even in the most unexpected places. As they found their seats, Danny felt the weight of their stares, but instead of feeling judged, he felt a surge of inspiration. He was here in this sacred space, ready to confront his past and embrace the possibility of a new beginning. He glanced around at the familiar faces, some filled with disbelief, others with encouragement, and he realized that his presence here was more than just a personal journey. It was a statement of faith. The service began, and as the pastor spoke, Danny listened intently, absorbing the words that seemed to resonate deeply within him. The message of redemption and hope echoed in his heart, a gentle reminder that he wasn't alone in his struggles. The community around him was not just a collection of individuals. They were a family, bound by shared experiences and unconditional support. As the congregation sang hymns and joined in prayer, Danny felt a sense of belonging wash over him. This was where he needed to be, a place where he could begin to heal, surrounded by those who cared for him. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but in this moment he felt a flicker of faith igniting within him, a promise of brighter days to come. The pastor's gaze lingered on Danny throughout the service, a mixture of pride and hope reflecting in his eyes. In that moment, Danny understood that his presence was more than just an act of defiance against his past. It was a beacon of light for others who might be struggling, a testament that no matter how far one strays, there is always a path back home. And as he sat there, he felt a sense of purpose begin to unfold, a realization that maybe, just maybe, he could inspire others too. As Danny stepped out of the church, the weight of the atmosphere inside seemed to follow him, heavy and suffocating. The initial warmth he felt quickly dissipated, replaced by a swirl of anxiety and uncertainty. Outside, he took a deep breath, the cool air hitting his lungs as he lit a cigarette, the familiar ritual providing a momentary sense of relief from the tumult within. He leaned against the brick exterior of the church, watching as parishioners mingled and chatted, their laughter and chatter echoing around him. It was a stark contrast to the storm raging inside his mind. He had felt their eyes on him, the surprise, the curiosity, the weight of expectations. Being back in that space had stirred up feelings and memories he wasn't quite ready to confront. The pastor's welcoming words felt like they had set a high bar, and the thought of not living up to it was unsettling. Inside, Maggie was still seated, her face a mixture of concern and confusion. She had seen the moment Danny got up, her eyes wide with an unspoken plea, silently urging him to stay, to engage, to be present in this moment of hope and renewal. But as he walked away, her heart sank. She knew how much this moment meant to him, how hard it had been to even step inside the church. And yet there he was, retreating back into the shadows of his past. Outside, Danny took another drag from his cigarette, watching the smoke curl and disappear into the morning air. He felt a wave of frustration wash over him. Why had he thought coming here would be easy? Why had he believed he could simply step back into this life, into this community, and everything would feel right again? The truth was, he didn't know how to reconcile the man he had become with the boy who had once found solace in this place. He glanced back at the church, the warm light spilling from the windows, illuminating the faces of those who were still engaged in the service. Each laugh, each prayer, felt like a reminder of what he had lost, of the connections that had frayed over time. He felt like an outsider, a ghost haunting the remnants of a life he could barely remember. As the minutes ticked by, he took another drag from his cigarette, the nicotine providing a temporary balm to his frayed nerves. He knew he should go back inside, face the uncomfortable feelings head on, but the thought of re-entering that space felt like an insurmountable challenge. Instead, he remained outside, feeling more like himself in the solitude, even if it was a version of himself he was trying to escape. The church bell rang, signaling the end of the service, and Danny felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He watched as people began to filter out, their faces lighting up at the sight of one another, exchanging hugs and laughter. He could see Maggie coming out, her expression a mixture of relief and worry as she scanned the crowd for him. When she spotted him leaning against the wall, her face softened, but concern quickly replaced it. She hurried over, her voice low but urgent. "Danny, please, you don't have to do this. Just come back in." "It's okay." He shook his head, his heart racing. "I can't, Maggie, I just can't." The words felt heavy on his tongue, filled with unspoken fears and insecurities that he didn't know how to articulate. "Why?" she pressed gently, her eyes searching his for answers. "You were doing so well. Just a few more minutes, please. You don't have to face this alone." Danny turned away, staring at the ground as his emotions threatened to overwhelm him. "I don't belong there anymore. That's not me. I'm not that guy. I've messed up too much." Maggie stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch his arm, grounding him in the moment. "But you're trying, Danny. That counts for something. You don't have to be perfect. Just come back with me. We're all here for you." He took a deep breath, looking into her eyes, filled with love and understanding. But deep down, he felt a deep-seated fear that he was dragging everyone down with him, that his struggles would only serve to hurt those he cared about. "I just need some time," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Maggie nodded slowly, understanding but clearly reluctant to let him go. "Okay, but promise me you'll think about it. You're not alone in this, Danny. You have me, and you have everyone back there who cares about you." As she stepped back, Danny felt a bittersweet pang in his heart. He watched her walk back toward the church, her figure fading into the crowd of familiar faces. The weight of his choices pressed heavily on him, and as he took another drag from his cigarette, he wondered how long he could keep running from the very place that once felt like home. For now, he stood outside, caught between the past and the hope of a new beginning, unsure of which path to take, but knowing that he had to face the truth eventually. The battle was only beginning, and deep down, he knew he couldn't stay in the shadows forever. As the church service wrapped up, the congregation began to disperse, laughter and chatter filling the air like a cacophony that only deepened Danny's sense of unease. He stood outside, still leaning against the brick wall, wrestling with the overwhelming emotions coursing through him. Just then, the pastor approached, his surprise mingling with a warmth that felt disingenuous. "So you're here, huh?" the pastor said, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "I never expected to see you here." Danny pulled the cigarette from his mouth, exhaling a cloud of smoke that felt like a barrier against the pastor's probing eyes. "You remember we had a deal, right?" he replied, a defiant edge creeping into his voice. The pastor raised an eyebrow, his expression unchanged. "I haven't said anything yet," he replied, his tone annoyingly calm. "However, you have a lot of demons, Danny." A flicker of annoyance ignited within Danny, threatening to flare into anger. "I don't need to hear this mumbo-jumbo," he shot back, crossing his arms defensively, the tension palpable. "It's not mumbo-jumbo," the pastor said firmly, his gaze steady and unwavering. "It's okay if you don't believe in demons, but I hope you know, Danny, they believe in you." With that, the pastor turned and walked away, leaving Danny to wrestle with the weight of his words. Frustration boiled inside him, and he felt a mix of anger and contemplation as he watched the pastor disappear into the crowd. How dare he throw around such notions, as if Danny's struggles were mere tales of folklore rather than the harsh reality he faced every day. After a few moments, Danny made his way to the parking lot, where Maggie was waiting in the car, her concern etched on her face. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice gentle but tinged with apprehension. "Yeah, I'm fine," he replied, though the half-truth tasted bitter on his tongue. "Are you coming to the party later?" "There's a parade in the middle of town," she said, her enthusiasm a stark contrast to his inner turmoil. Danny hesitated, the thought of being surrounded by a crowd making him feel uneasy. But there was a part of him that longed for connection, for a distraction from the heaviness of his thoughts. "Sure, why not?" he said, forcing a smile that felt more like a mask than an expression of genuine interest. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a golden hue over the town, they made their way to the parade. The atmosphere was electric, filled with laughter, music, and the vibrant colors of floats moving down the street. Danny felt the tension in his shoulders begin to ease as he took in the festive surroundings. He and Maggie found a spot at a table, and as he cracked open a beer, he felt a sense of camaraderie with the people around him. They chatted and laughed, but his mind was still tangled in the thoughts of the pastor's words, which clung to him like shadows. Then, as he took a sip from his beer, his gaze drifted across the crowd, and he saw her. She stood a few tables down, a vision of beauty that felt almost otherworldly, radiating warmth and light that seemed to challenge the darkness that lurked within him. Her long hair danced in the gentle breeze, and her smile was like a siren's call, drawing people in with an almost magnetic pull. Danny's heart raced, and for a moment he felt utterly captivated. But then self-doubt crashed over him like a wave. What would he say? Would she even be interested in a guy like him with all his baggage? It felt absurd, standing there with a beer in hand, contemplating a conversation with someone who looked like she belonged in a different world altogether. Taking another swig, he tried to shake off the hesitation, but it clung to him like a shroud. He watched her interact with her friends, her laughter echoing around him, and an aching longing welled up inside him, fierce and unrelenting. "You have to go talk to her," a voice inside urged him, but it was drowned out by the chorus of his insecurities. Danny clenched his fist around the beer can, the cold metal pressing against his skin, grounding him in the moment. This was a chance, an opportunity to step out of the shadows of his past and into the light of a new possibility. He stood up, adrenaline surging through him, and wiped his palms on his jeans. "Hey, Maggie," he said, turning to his cousin, his voice sharp with newfound determination. "I'll be right back." "What are you doing?" she asked, her brow furrowing in concern. "I just want to go say hi," he replied, the words firm and resolute. "Okay, be careful," she called after him, her tone a mix of encouragement and caution, but he barely registered it as he pushed through the crowd. With each step toward her, the noise around him faded into a dull roar, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. As he neared the table, he felt a mix of excitement and nerves bubbling within him, a cocktail of reckless abandon and fear. This was a moment of vulnerability, a chance to assert himself against the demons that whispered self-doubt in his ear. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever might come next. As he approached her, ready to introduce himself, he could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders, but he also felt a flicker of hope igniting within him. This was his moment, and he intended to seize it, come hell or high water. As Danny navigated the vibrant crowd, the energy of the gathering enveloped him, but his focus was singular, an enchanting woman who seemed to stand apart from the rest. She had an air of grace and charm that drew him in, her laughter ringing like music against the backdrop of chatter. It was as though time slowed, and in that moment nothing else mattered. The way her hair danced in the gentle breeze and how her eyes sparkled with joy created a magnetic pull that left him breathless. Danny felt a flutter in his chest, an exhilarating mix of hope and desire that urged him to take a leap of faith. Just as he gathered his courage to close the distance, a familiar voice sliced through his reverie. "Danny, my son, we need to talk about something," the pastor said, stepping into view with a look of earnest concern. His tone held a weight that Danny could feel pressing down on his shoulders, a reminder of the responsibilities and expectations that often accompanied his life. Danny's heart raced, torn between duty and desire. "Okay, we can talk, but not right now, later," he replied, his voice carrying an edge of impatience. He felt the pastor's hand lightly brush against his arm as if trying to anchor him to reality. But Danny was already slipping away, driven by an overpowering longing for the woman who had captivated his heart so completely. The pastor's brow furrowed in confusion, and he attempted to continue, perhaps sensing the whirlwind of emotions swirling within Danny. But Danny was already lost, his mind racing with thoughts of the beautiful woman, her laughter echoing in his ears. He could almost picture her smile, the way it lit up her face, igniting a warmth that spread through him. However, as he approached the spot where she had stood just moments before, a chilling realization washed over him. The vibrant energy that had surrounded her was now replaced by the cold weight of absence. She was gone, vanished like a fleeting dream, leaving Danny with a hollow ache in his chest. Panic set in as he scanned the crowd, desperately searching for any trace of her, but she was nowhere to be found. The thrill of attraction transformed into a storm of frustration and confusion, tightening around him like a vise. Feeling defeated and disheartened, Danny turned away, his heart heavy with the weight of missed opportunity. He walked back to where his cousin Maggie waited, her eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and concern. "Did you talk to her?" Maggie asked, her voice bright but laced with the anticipation of what she hoped to hear. Danny sighed, the sound heavy with disappointment. "No," he admitted, his shoulders slumping. "I didn't get the chance." Maggie furrowed her brow, trying to piece together the fragments of the moment. "I didn't see who you were talking about, though," she said, genuinely intrigued, her interest piqued by the way Danny's expression shifted. Danny's heart ached as he recalled the woman, her beauty etched in his memory like an indelible mark. "She was one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper, tinged with awe and longing. He could still envision her smile, a radiant beacon that illuminated the crowd, and the way her hair glimmered like spun gold in the sunlight. The spark in her eyes ignited something within him, a flicker of hope, a yearning for connection that transcended the mundane. Maggie observed him closely, sensing the depth of his emotions. "Wow, she must have been something special," she remarked, a teasing smile creeping onto her face as she nudged him playfully. "Are you going to go find her?" Danny shrugged, grappling with a mix of determination and uncertainty. "I don't know. I wish I could have at least said something." His voice faltered, revealing the vulnerability he felt. The weight of unspoken words and missed chances sat heavily on his heart. In that moment, the interaction with Maggie served as a grounding force for Danny. It brought to light not only his longing, but also the fleeting nature of connections in life. Here he was, confronted with the reality of what could have been, and the unpredictability of life loomed large around him. This moment marked a significant turning point for Danny. It was not merely about the woman who had captivated him. It was about understanding the need to seize opportunities when they arise. The realization washed over him that life was a series of fleeting moments, each one precious, each one a potential turning point. He found himself contemplating whether he would muster the courage to seek her out again, to take that risk, and whether this experience would shape his views on relationships and the connections he yearned for. As Danny pondered these questions, an unexpected clarity began to emerge. He understood that the beauty of life often lay in the unexpected twists and turns, and sometimes the pursuit itself was just as compelling as the goal. The ache of longing intertwined with the thrill of possibility, igniting a spark within him that urged him to embrace the uncertainty ahead. In that crowded space, amidst the lively chatter and laughter, Danny realized that the path forward was not just about finding the woman who had captured his heart, but also about discovering himself, his desires, his fears, and his capacity for connection. The journey ahead promised to be as transformative as the moment itself, and perhaps, just perhaps, it would lead him to the answers he sought. Danny sat at the dimly lit bar, the air thick with the scent of spilled beer and the muffled sounds of laughter and clinking glasses around him. He nursed a drink, the amber liquid swirling in his glass, mirroring the turmoil brewing within him. Each sip was both a comfort and a torment, a way to drown out the cacophony of his thoughts and the insistent ache of longing for the beautiful woman who had slipped through his fingers like sand, leaving only the faintest trace of her presence in his memory. As he stared into his drink, vivid memories of her flooded his mind, her laughter bright and melodic, cutting through the noise of the bar like a siren song, the way her hair cascaded around her shoulders like a waterfall of silk, the sparkle in her eyes that had ignited a spark deep within him, awakening feelings he had long buried. He chuckled softly to himself, lost in the reverie. She was stunning, he muttered to the empty bar stool next to him, as if the seat could somehow absorb his admiration. The most beautiful woman I've ever seen. I should have talked to her. I should have. His voice trailed off, swallowed by another drink. The burn of the alcohol a welcome distraction from the regret gnawing at his insides. He leaned back, the bar's wooden surface cool against his skin, and let out a laugh that was half joy and half despair. You should have seen her. She was like a goddess, man, he exclaimed, turning to the small group of guys gathered at the other end of the bar, his enthusiasm spilling over despite the haze of drunkenness. One of the men, a burly guy with a scruffy beard and a twinkle in his eye, glanced over, intrigued. What are you on about, Danny? He asked, leaning forward, a smirk dancing on his lips. What goddess are you rambling about? Danny's eyes lit up, fueled by the warmth of camaraderie and the alcohol coursing through his veins. You wouldn't believe it. She had this smile that could light up the darkest room, and her laugh. Oh man, her laugh was like music. I swear it stopped time for me. He gestured dramatically, his hands slicing through the air as he painted the picture of the woman in his mind, her essence shimmering like a mirage. Another guy leaned in, chuckling. I wish I would have seen her the way you're making her sound. Sounds like you're in love already. His comment elicited laughter from the group, but Danny's heart sank a little at the truth buried in the jest, the weight of his emotions pressing down on him like a lead blanket. Love, maybe, Danny replied, a wistful smile creeping onto his face, the words tasting bittersweet on his tongue. But it's more than that. It's like she was everything I didn't know I was missing, a spark in the darkness. He took another swig from his glass, the alcohol warming him from the inside, but the fleeting happiness it brought was a cruel reminder of the woman he pined for. The men continued to tease him, but Danny was lost in a whirlwind of thoughts, imagining what it would have been like to approach her, to ask for her name, to learn her story, what had drawn him to her so fiercely. He drowned in his drink, surrounded by laughter, but feeling more alone than ever. The reality that she was just a fleeting moment in his life weighed heavily on him, and no amount of alcohol could fill that void. As the night wore on, the laughter around him became a blur, a cacophony of voices that faded into the background, and all he could think about was how he let the moment slip away. The beautiful woman remained a shimmering ghost in his mind, haunting him with each passing second, and while he was surrounded by friends, he felt an aching loneliness that no drink could erase. Suddenly a thought struck him like lightning. What if she was still here? What if she hadn't left? The mere possibility sent his heart racing. Would he ever find her again? Would he ever have the courage to seize a moment before it vanished? These questions hung in the air, unanswered, as Danny continued to drink, laugh, and dream of the woman who had captivated him so completely. The bartender, an observant figure with a knowing smile, leaned in closer. You keep talking about her, my friend. Maybe it's time you stop wasting your night and go find her, he suggested, his voice low but filled with encouragement. Danny looked up, the bartender's words cutting through the fog of alcohol and regret. For the first time that night, hope flickered within him, a tiny flame in the darkness. Perhaps this wasn't just a night of drowning his sorrows. Perhaps it was a call to action, a chance to rewrite the narrative of his evening. With a sudden surge of determination, Danny set down his glass, his heart pounding with renewed purpose. "You know what, you're right," he declared, a grin breaking across his face. "I'm going to find her." The laughter and teasing from his friends faded into the background as he stood up, the dim bar lights illuminating a path forward. In that moment, Danny realized that life was too short to dwell on missed opportunities. He would not let this chance slip away. With each step, he felt the weight of regret lifting, replaced by the exhilarating rush of possibility. As he pushed through the crowd, he was no longer just a man lost in his thoughts. He was a man on a mission, ready to chase the shimmer of a dream that had ignited a fire in his heart. The night was still young, and somewhere in the bustling crowd, the beautiful woman might still be waiting for him. As the laughter and chatter swirled around the bar, one of the guys, a lanky fellow with a quick wit and a penchant for exaggeration, leaned back in his chair, shaking his head with disbelief. "I can't believe Danny is actually in love or whatever he's been rambling about," he said, chuckling, his voice rising above the din. "All that good stuff he was talking about. I hope when he sees her, he actually says something." The group nodded, their laughter mingling with the clinking of glasses, the warmth of camaraderie filling the air. "Yeah, right, like he's actually going to do it," another friend chimed in, rolling his eyes playfully as he took a hearty swig from his beer. "I mean, he's had, 2 more shots before he left. The guy's probably 3 sheets to the wind." The first guy leaned forward, an amused glint in his eye. "Well, if he's not careful, he's going to end up passed out in some alley before he even gets the chance to talk to her, probably drooling on himself too." With that, he stood up, the alcohol having loosened his limbs and his inhibitions. "You know what? I think I'm about to head home before I end up like him," he declared, swaying slightly as he made his way to the bar door. As he swung it open, a burst of laughter erupted from the bar, echoing into the night air like a joyful anthem. The sounds of the patrons carrying on inside were abruptly interrupted by Mickey, the bartender, who looked over, eyebrows raised in curiosity. "What's got you laughing so hard?" he asked, wiping his hands on a towel, a bemused smile playing on his lips. The guy turned around, pointing back towards where Danny had been. "You won't believe it, but Danny is." His words cut off as he took in the sight before him. There on the floor, sprawled out and entirely oblivious to the world, was Danny, his head resting against the cool wooden floor, his mouth slightly open and snoring lightly, a puddle of spilled drink pooling beside him. The laughter in the bar turned to a chorus of incredulous chuckles, the scene unfolding like a comical play, a slapstick moment etched in time. "We thought he left 15 minutes ago," the guy continued, shaking his head in disbelief, a grin spreading across his face as he gestured toward Danny. "But look at him. The man's asleep right here on the floor. Someone check his pulse. He might be in a love coma." The sight was too hilarious to resist, and the laughter rippled through the bar, drawing more patrons over to witness the spectacle. Mickey, shaking his head but unable to suppress a smile, called out, "Come on, guys, at least help me put him in his car before he wakes up and tries to fight us. We don't need him thinking he's the king of the world right now." "Yeah, right, the only thing he's king of is the floor," one guy hollered, earning a fresh wave of laughter that echoed through the bar. "Where's his crown? Is it buried in that puddle of beer?" With that, a small group of friends gathered around Danny, each one trying to stifle their laughter as they carefully lifted him, the weight of their friend both amusing and daunting. Mickey guided them, his face filled with both amusement and concern. "Easy now, don't drop him. We don't need to add injured to the list of things he's going to regret in the morning. If he wakes up like this, he might just think he's auditioning for a drunk reality show." As they maneuvered Danny, the laughter only grew louder, the camaraderie of the moment infectious. "Look at him, he really thought he was going to chase after that girl," one of the guys joked, as they struggled to keep Danny upright. "More like he's chasing dreams and losing. At this rate, he'll be dreaming about her while he's still on the floor." Finally, they managed to get him to his feet, though he swayed like a tree in the wind, still blissfully unaware of the laughter that surrounded him. "He might just wake up and think he's still at the bar," another friend quipped, "asking us for another round. Just one more drink, fellas." With a collective effort, they guided him toward the door, Mickey shaking his head, but his eyes twinkling with humor. "Let's get him to his car before he decides to serenade the whole bar with his love ballad," Mickey joked, the laughter echoing in the night as they stumbled out into fresh air. The cool breeze a stark contrast to the warm, boisterous atmosphere inside. Once outside, the group carefully maneuvered Danny onto the pavement, the night pulsing with the energy of friendship, laughter, and the bittersweet reminder that sometimes life's most memorable moments come when you least expect them. "Look at him out here in the moonlight like a fallen star," one guy said, pointing at Danny sprawled on the ground. "He's the only one who can make being unconscious look so glamorous." As they finally managed to hoist him into his car, the energy buzzed with mischief and affection. Mickey leaned against the car, arms crossed, shaking his head with a chuckle. "You know, if he wakes up thinking he's ready to go out again, we might have to start charging him for this night out," he said, laughter bubbling up once more. In that moment, as they closed the car door on their slumbering friend, they were reminded of the bonds that tied them together, laughter, stories, and the joy of simply being alive, even if one of them was a little too far gone to appreciate it just then. The next day, sunlight poured through the gaps in Danny's curtains, gently nudging him awake. He squinted at the clock on his bedside table and his heart dropped. "Oh shit," he exclaimed, scrambling out of bed. Panic surged through him as he realized he had completely forgotten that today was the day his cousin Maggie and Mickey were finally buying their first house. He jumped into action, racing to the bathroom. With adrenaline coursing through his veins, he brushed his teeth and turned on the shower, barely registering the chill of the tile beneath his feet. After a quick rinse, he threw on some clothes, barely glancing in the mirror before grabbing his keys and bolting out the door, excitement mixed with anxiety propelling him forward. When Danny arrived at the new house, he was greeted by a whirlwind of activity. Mickey was barking orders at the moving crew, directing them as they unloaded boxes and furniture onto the front lawn. "Mickey," Danny called out, a mix of embarrassment and excitement bubbling within him. "Why didn't you wake me up?" Mickey turned, a bemused expression crossing his face. "We tried, man, you were out cold. We had to get a moving company to help us move all this stuff," he replied, gesturing at the chaos of boxes and furniture. Stepping inside, Danny was immediately struck by the charm of the house. Sunlight spilled in through large windows, illuminating the freshly painted walls and creating an inviting atmosphere. Just then, Maggie came bounding into view, her face lit up with joy. "Danny, you made it," she exclaimed, rushing over to him. "Let me show you around our new home." Without waiting for a response, she grabbed his arm and led him through the front door, her excitement infectious as she pointed out the living room, the kitchen, and even the backyard, her enthusiasm painting vivid pictures of their future there. 3 hours passed in what felt like mere moments, filled with laughter and the sound of boxes being unpacked. Mickey finally wandered into the kitchen, wiping sweat from his brow. "Hey Danny," he said, "let's go grab some coffee from that store down the street. You look like you could use a pick-me-up." Maggie, overhearing them, chimed in from the living room. "Don't forget to bring me back some. I need my caffeine fix to keep this unpacking going." "Absolutely, what do you want?" Danny called back. "Surprise me," she shouted, her voice cheerful as she resumed her unpacking. As Danny and Mickey made their way to the store, the sunny day felt invigorating, and Danny couldn't shake the fluttering excitement in his chest, not just for the housewarming, but for the chance to run into the beautiful woman he had seen at the party the other night. Upon entering the store, Mickey turned to Danny with a grin. "I'm about to use their bathroom. You good here?" "Yeah, I'm fine." "Go ahead," Danny replied, his gaze wandering as Mickey headed toward the back of the store. Danny stepped into line, his mind wandering as he scanned the shelves filled with coffee beans and snacks. Just then, something caught his eye, and his breath hitched in his throat. There she was, the stunning woman from the party, sitting at a small table near the window, looking effortlessly beautiful. The soft morning light illuminated her features, highlighting her delicate smile as she sipped her coffee. Time seemed to freeze as he watched her, completely captivated. Her laughter from the party echoed in his mind, mingling with the sweet aroma of coffee that surrounded him. Danny's heart began to race, a mix of nervous excitement and bashfulness bubbling up inside him. He felt his cheeks flush slightly as he took in the sight of her, the way she casually tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, completely unaware of the effect she had on him. Could this really be happening? Here she was in the same store in the same moment. He felt a rush of determination mixed with apprehension. This was his chance to finally say something, to bridge the gap that had kept them apart the other night. With a deep breath, he shifted his weight from one foot to the other, trying to muster the courage to approach her. The line seemed to stretch longer than usual, each second feeling like an eternity. He ran a hand through his hair, feeling a mix of excitement and bashfulness as he formulated a plan in his mind. Just then, Mickey reappeared, shaking off the water from washing his hands. "You ready?" he asked, eyeing Danny, who was still entranced by the woman across the room. "Dude, you look like you've just seen a ghost. What's going on?" Danny snapped back to reality, realizing he had been caught staring. Nothing. Just," he stammered, glancing back at her. "Just saw someone I know." Mickey raised an eyebrow, a knowing smile creeping onto his face. "All right, man, just don't let her slip away again. Go say hi." With Mickey's encouragement ringing in his ears, Danny felt a surge of determination. Taking a deep breath, he turned to face the beautiful woman, heart racing as he took a tentative step forward. As he approached her table, the world around him faded into a blur, and all he could focus on was her. She looked up just as he reached her, and their eyes met. In that instant, Danny felt a jolt of electricity course through him, and he could hardly believe how stunning she looked up close. "Hey," he managed to say, his voice coming out softer than he intended, a hint of bashfulness creeping in. "I didn't expect to see you here." Her smile widened, and he noticed the way her eyes sparkled even more in the light. "Hey, I remember you from the party." "I didn't expect to see you either," she replied, her voice warm and inviting. Danny felt a rush of warmth flood his cheeks, suddenly feeling shy yet exhilarated. "Yeah, it's funny how small the world can be," he said, trying to sound casual but feeling his nerves bubbling beneath the surface. "I'm just here to grab some coffee. My cousin and her fiancé just bought a house nearby." "Oh, that's exciting. Congratulations to them," she said, her enthusiasm genuine. "I just came here for my morning coffee fix. It's my little routine." Danny nodded, grateful for the opportunity to keep the conversation going. "What's your go-to order?" he asked, genuinely curious, feeling his bashfulness slowly dissipate as they talked. "Oh, I'm a sucker for a good caramel latte," she said, tapping her chin thoughtfully. "But I also love trying new flavors. What about you?" "I usually stick to black coffee, but maybe I should branch out," he admitted, letting a shy smile spread across his face. "You might just inspire me to get a little adventurous." Their conversation flowed effortlessly, punctuated by laughter and shared smiles. Danny couldn't believe how easy it was to connect with her, and he felt his bashfulness melting away, replaced by a sense of comfort and excitement. As they chatted, he realized that this chance encounter was more than just a fleeting moment. It felt like the beginning of something special. With every word exchanged, the connection between them deepened, and Danny found himself captivated by her charm. As he glanced at her, her smile brightening his day, he couldn't help but feel that fate had played a hand in bringing them together once again, each heartbeat echoing the promise of new possibilities. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more content like this. Don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing from you. Thank you so much again.